Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a high stakes, almost invisible power struggle that's happening all the time. It shapes your relationship with the government, and it's called UK administrative law. It's a constant battle over who really holds authority, who checks that authority, and, who gets the final say when your rights clash with the power of the state. So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll get a handle on what this area of law actually is. Then we'll get into the two rival philosophies that are constantly clashing. After that, we'll look at the court's biggest weapon in this fight, see why things have gotten so heated in recent years, and we'll wrap up with the huge constitutional question that still hangs in the air. All right, so first up, what exactly is this battleground we're talking about? Well, when you boil it all down, it's about holding power to account. I mean, come on, we've all felt that, right? Maybe it was a decision about a planning permit for your house, or a license for your small business, or even some change to a public service you really count on. Well, administrative law is basically the rule book that says how public authorities, we're talking everyone from government ministers all the way down to your local council, can use their power over you. Sir Ivor Jennings put it about as simply as you can. It's the law of the administration. At its heart, it's the legal framework that regulates the government's entire machine. It defines what powers they have, what duties they have, and it's all there to make sure that these public bodies stay within their legal limits. It's kind of like a legal shield for us citizens against them going too far. And this brings us to what is maybe the most fundamental principle of the entire UK system. There is no such thing as absolute power. Every single power given to a public body, it doesn't matter how broad the wording is in the law, it always comes with legal strings attached, limits that the courts can step in and enforce. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. This whole field is basically a clash between two totally different philosophies about what administrative law is even for. It's a real tug-of-war between two opposing ways of thinking. So first up, you've got the red light theory. Just think of it as the stop sign approach. This view is pretty suspicious of government power. It believes the courts are absolutely essential guardians that have to rein in the government, correct any abuses, and basically protect the individual from the sheer might of the state. And then on the other side, you have the green light theory. This is the go approach. It sees the law not as a break, but more like a helpful tool to let the government get on with its job and govern effectively for the public good. This side puts a lot more trust in political accountability. Things like elections and debates in parliament, rather than having judges interfere. And this tension is really what shapes the entire field. Should the law's main job be a red light, an external brake to stop the state? Or should it be a green light, a framework to help the elected government get its policies done? Where you land on that question, well, it pretty much determines everything else. So you might be wondering, where does this battle actually take place? Well, the main arena, the main battlefield, is a powerful legal process that you've probably heard of. It's called judicial review. Now, here's the absolutely crucial thing to get. Judicial review isn't about a court deciding if a government decision was the right one. Nope, it doesn't get into the merits of the decision at all. It only checks one thing. Was the decision made lawfully? Let me put it another way. An appeal is like asking a second referee to watch the same play and maybe make a different call. A review, on the other hand, is about checking if the first referee even followed the rulebook. The court can't just sub in its own decision. It can only blow the whistle and send the whole thing back if the basic rules of the game were broken. And the courts can only jump in on these very specific legal grounds. So, illegality means the public body went way beyond the powers it was actually given. Irrationality is for a decision that is just so completely absurd that no reasonable authority could ever have made it. And procedural impropriety is when the process itself was biased or unfair. Maybe you weren't even given a chance to state your case. Now, the classic argument for why the courts even have this power is something called the ultra vires doctrine. This is the old school red light justification. The idea is that the courts aren't making up new law. They're simply enforcing what Parliament wanted all along by making sure government bodies don't go beyond the specific powers that Parliament gave them. So why is all this such a big deal now? Well, because in the last few decades, this tension between the courts and the government has seriously escalated. The battlefield has gotten a whole lot bigger, with courts taking a much more active role in checking what the government does. You see, as the government got involved in more and more parts of our daily lives, everything from welfare benefits to super complex regulations, a lot of people started to feel that the old political checks, like asking a minister a tough question in parliament, just weren't cutting it anymore. They weren't enough to protect people from potential government overreach.
And this quote from Lord Mustill, wow, it just says it all. He argued that the courts weren't on some kind of power grab. Instead, he said they were just stepping into a gap, what he called the dead ground, that the political process had left empty, just to make sure that citizens weren't left unprotected.
And a few things really drove this expansion. The modern welfare state got bigger, so it needed more oversight. But the real game changer was the Human Rights Act of 1998. It gave the courts a powerful new set of principles to work with, like proportionality, and that just changed everything. Yeah. The Human Rights Act brought in this idea of proportionality. And what that meant was that courts could now go beyond just asking if a decision was legal. They could start asking if it was a necessary and proportionate interference with someone's human rights. And that inevitably led them to look much more closely at the substance of the decisions themselves, blurring that old, clear line between a review and an appeal. And all of this brings us right up to today, where this fundamental tug-of-war over power, over accountability, and over the role of the courts is very, very much alive and kicking. And I really want to stress this is not just some technical, dusty argument for lawyers. The struggle between the red and green light views is a live, real-time debate about the very nature of the UK's unwritten constitution. It's a debate about who should have the ultimate say on where the limits of government power lie. So really, the core of the debate today boils down to this. Where does the court's power actually come from? Is it a kind of cooperative partnership where they're just enforcing Parliament's will, or does it come from a deeper, independent duty that judges have under common law to uphold the fundamental principles of the rule of law, things like fairness and reasonableness? And so, we're left with that fundamental question, right at the heart of this whole invisible battle. In this perpetual tug-of-war between a government's need to act and a court's power to check, where do you think the balance of power should truly lie? The answer to that question is still being fought over, and it continues to shape the relationship between you, the courts, and the state.